feeding. Hold on. We're not on LinkedIn. Something's happening. Give me a minute.
Gotta love all the technology. It's all on the cloud, right?
It just came up saying that you are live on LinkedIn, Mike. I got it on my phone.
Great. We're live. Matt, it's all you. Go ahead.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are so excited to tee up our first Procurement Foundry Topics in Technology expert panel discussion for the new year. Since we rested up a bit last month, we are starting off the year with a big topic addressing what may be the biggest topic in our profession today, the cloud wars. And since it is such a big topic, we have an extra big expert panel to talk about it today. Before I introduce them, let me remind you that the Q&A function is open. Q&A is easier for us to monitor than chat, so please direct your stuff there. And we will do our best to address all of your questions today. And those we can't get to live, we will make every effort to follow up on in the Procurement Foundry discussion channels. If you are not a member of Procurement Foundry, shame on you. You're missing out on so much of value to make you better at what you're paid to do. So first up for our panel today, we have Sanjay Khandelwal. Sanjay currently leads indirect sourcing at Carbon Inc., a 3D printer startup based in Redwood City, California. Over his career, Sanjay has worked or consulted at multiple companies, large and small, public and private, including Hewlett-Packard, Agilent, Spring Education, and Twitter. He has led global teams and worked in different functions, including finance, sales, customer support, and corporate development, including a couple stints as Chief Procurement Officer. His current favorite quote is by Maya Angelou: "If you don't like something, change it. If you can't change it, change your attitude." Very inspiring. Thank you, Sanjay.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
All right. Our second panelist today is Ioana Dragan. Ioana mastered in international business from the Academy of Economic Studies in Bucharest before starting her career at Honeywell Garrett, where she managed the purchasing of direct materials for the turbocharger division. She then moved to Ericsson, where she worked her way through the sourcing of managed services, system integration, consultancy, and colo, before taking on her current role as head of cloud and infrastructure services procurement, our topic for today. Thank you so much for joining us, Ioana.
Hi, everyone. Nice to be here.
Next up, Kim Masters' strategic sourcing experience spans multiple commodities, but the majority of her experience has been in the tech sector, having built strategic sourcing and procurement groups at several industry-leading tech-heavy companies, including senior roles at OpenTable, Price Grabber, Riot Games, and currently everyone's best friend and absolute necessity during COVID, Netflix. Welcome, Kim. And
Thank you.
And our fourth and final panelist has worked at the most senior levels leading procurement, IT, and supply chain, leveraging his extensive experience in technology, operations, and functional leadership to drive dramatic business improvements and innovation, achieving extraordinary results in digital transformation, profitability, and organizational development. He is a sourcing industry group Supernova Hall of Fame award winner, an Everest Group Sourcing Innovation Pinnacle Enterprise Award winner, and a member of the Thought Leadership Council at the Institute for Supply Management and the Sourcing Industry Group Advisory Board. A great friend of the Procurement Foundry community, Mr. Mike Morsch. Welcome to our panel today, Mike.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Okay, so the topic today is about cloud. And cloud infrastructure market has been on fire for a while now. For 2020 globally, it grew 32% and is now a $142 billion industry. AWS continues to dominate with almost a third of the market, slightly bigger than Azure, Google, and Alibaba combined. AWS now makes up half of all Amazon's profits and is bigger than Salesforce.com and SAP combined. That said, AWS growth has slowed somewhat, trailing the overall market by a few percentage points in the last quarter. So before we dive into specific suppliers, let's talk a little bit about the growth of cloud infrastructure in general, both public and private. And in the spirit of age before beauty, Mike, would you mind kicking us off on what you're seeing in the migration from traditional data centers to cloud architecture?
Sure, sure, happy to do so. It's been a very dramatic change that's been going on, and it's been going on longer than people realize, I think, as AWS and the others got going. And there's been a very strong push internally in companies to have more flexibility in how they operate their infrastructure. And the cloud providers were really smart about coming in and providing that. There's still a strong base of companies running their own data centers and that type of thing, or adopting co-location, large data centers that they have the infrastructure, at least part of it provided for them. But as you look at the marketplace, it's getting easier and easier to adopt these technologies. The companies are getting smarter about how they not just market it, but make it available to integrate, so you can be in a hybrid environment much more easily than you could have just a couple of years ago. But I think it's great for customers, right? I think it's great because it's going to give us a lot more options as both there's additional, AWS gets the big voice here, right? But additional providers come in, they're all going to get smarter about how they make it easier to integrate and utilize in a hybrid environment. And it's going to be great for customers because we're going to have more options and improved quality as time goes by. So I see it as just a great thing for us as buyers of what we need to do. We just have to look through some of the cautionary tales as you go through this, eyes wide open, as it's not all perfect. And I'm sure my friends here on the call will be able to share some of their the fun that they've had in this environment. So thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Mike. Sanjay, you've worked in a range of big and small, public and private. Have you seen any trends or items of interest in the adoption of cloud technology?
Yeah, it's I think as Mike said, right, it's been around for a while. And I would say that the larger companies are slower to go on it. And it's just because they already have their built-in data centers. I would also say that the larger companies that I've seen have a lot more hurdles, right? I mean, A, you already got it built in. B, it's all that data security. So I've worked for a lot of companies where R&D is really, really, really important, and IP. And putting all that stuff up in the cloud is of concern. Again, smaller companies who've never had a data center, I mean, this is easy. Why build it? Why not just buy it? So it's that classic build versus buy, pretty simple. It's so easy to ramp up. It is so easy to add, subtract, do different types of servers, etc. So, and again, in that private sector where IP is important and where you've already got that built-in cost. When I used to work, I won't name the company, but a big company, we'd spent a lot of money on our own data centers, and we had already optimized it. And I'd worked on a project to do that. So when you've got it already optimized, you've got it at the cheapest location, and you start doing all the math to close that down and move it, that hurdle is higher. But again, I think it's happening more and more. It is the future. Data and concerns and all that is definitely something to think about. I mean, from a procurement viewpoint, I'll tell you, AWS doesn't really, do anything on the T's and C's. It's this is what it is, take it or leave it. And that is a little hard one to swallow. Yeah, you can get a little bit of pricing discounts. And I love the fact that you've got GCP and Azure and stuff, right? Competition is wonderful. So.
Ioana, I saw you nodding your head through a lot of that, particularly when he was referencing legacy data centers.
Yes, I was thinking about the fact that in these smaller companies do benefit quite a lot due to the scalability of public cloud, right? You can spin off a machine, just go into the public cloud, spin off a virtual machine, and just stop it when you need it. I mean, that's pretty much all you can take, right? But I was thinking about what Sanjay was saying about the fact that in the end, there are multiple options in the market. And for a procurement specialist, I think this is heaven, with the fact that we have we have the Amazon, we have the Azure, Google, Alibaba, you name it. You have so many options, and it's basically, this is public cloud, but then we talk private cloud, and then we talk a co-location in which you build your private cloud. So kind of an on-prem private cloud, which is super interesting, and indeed it is a procurement heaven. You have multiple choices and models that not only combine with one another, but as well compete with one another, which is even more interesting. So I think we really have an opportunity right now to leverage all the possibilities while taking into considerations aspects such as security. But definitely go out there and search for the best model. And indeed, it's more difficult when you have already invested in your own data center space. But from that perspective, I think as a procurement specialist, we need to ensure that we are actually making a good analysis on make versus buy.
I think that the scalability is probably the largest win, especially, having experience in gaming and in entertainment. Especially think about when you launch a game, you're going to see like 4 times the traffic that you would normally see suddenly on your site as everybody logs on to play that new game. And then over a period of time, that usage is going to ramp down a little bit as the users that will stick and the gamers that love the game will continue to use it. But if you were to build up brick and mortar infrastructure to support that peak, you'd have a lot of waste at the end of that, 6 to 8 months when you've gone down to your new normal of users. And I think that particular application is probably the biggest win to leverage. And yes, competition is great. And I think that all of the cloud providers are having to find ways to make transition between services a little bit easier, map paths for migration, provide professional services to support that. There's certainly a lot of companies that are coming up that will help you with those, bridge the gap between different providers that allow you to utilize multiple cloud providers. But it's definitely still a space that's growing. It's going to be really interesting to watch it over the years.
Thank you, Kim. Yeah, we touched on a lot of stuff there, a lot of meat for us to go through in the time we have today around what it takes to implement it and the migration path and those things. Let's talk a little bit about the providers out there and how they're, one of the things everybody commented on was that there is a competitive environment. Let's talk a little bit about how, the big guys, Azure and Google, differentiate themselves and how they compete with AWS and who else might be out there, what other factors there are. Ioana, would you like to start us off?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I think right now all companies are as accessible, and like Sanjay mentioned, indeed the terms and conditions might not be the most the most appreciated ones, but in the same time they are quite similar when it comes to all cloud providers. So maybe from that perspective it's not that bad, and then if you manage to get a differentiation, that is awesome in the end. I'm thinking that I'm getting actually all the time asked which is cheaper or which is better, and the answer is it depends, because it depends. Amazon has its good points. They are the market leader. They create a disruptive environment. They were the ones that started the cloud. So basically, they have their merits. Then with respect to Azure, of course, Azure has their own merits in terms of their high experience in cloud, and Azure is Microsoft, right? So we have a benefit when it comes to using the Microsoft licenses in the Azure cloud. That needs to be considered when you make an analysis. We need to look at the restrictions that that have been laid out in the communications from Microsoft, right? Because you, for instance, you are not able to use some of the licenses in other clouds. That is a good consideration when you are analyzing where to put your workload. Then Google, for instance, Google is a great player that is coming up from with newer technologies. They really want to steal market share, and it's normal. They are coming up very strong. So I would say all of the cloud providers, together with others that are I don't know, IBM Cloud, for instance, Oracle Cloud, all of them need to be taken into consideration from different perspectives. So it depends. It depends on your use case, frankly speaking.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I mean, I think Ioana is totally right. It is on the use case. And again, it depends on what you're using it for, right? When you start thinking in the R&D, or when you start building your entire infrastructure on it, incumbency means a lot, right? You've got the engineering team and everything. They've built out everything. I mean, so let's just take Netflix. Kim, I never mentioned this to you. A good friend of mine used to work at Netflix, and he was one of the AWS architects there, and main guys who did it. And as he told me, Netflix has built it on AWS. So just saying that you're going to move, it's not that easy, right? Same with a couple of companies I've been with. A lot of the architecture is built on that. We've looked at Google, and it really came down to two things. Google, Azure, others. It really came down to two things. Hey, can you share with us all your server architecture, network, and everything, so we can see if we can replicate it? And then pricing. From a procurement viewpoint, yeah, the pricing is something you can totally deal with. There is lots of discounts that are available depending on your size, obviously. If you're really, really small, it doesn't matter. But if you've got over $1 million spend and stuff, yeah, they start talking to you. You can get billing discounts, you can get different types of discounts. But that server architecture, the network design, everything that's built in, it is not that simple to just up and move it and then change it. And then that is something that you got to look into.
That is probably the biggest hurdle to migration, I think, is the amount of effort that's required to change from one provider to the other. And when you're looking at like, okay, we could have all of our engineers working on building a new game or supporting a new streaming service, or do we work on migrating to a different cloud provider at X amount of savings? And you start looking at that opportunity cost, and sometimes it doesn't hash out.
Yeah, and great points from the group here. And the cloud providers today really they do play off well of the other technology you have in your footprint. So if you're a SQL Server database or Oracle or whatever it is, they're going to make the licensing very, as Ioana talked about, easier, more cost effective in their platform and their cloud versus others. And you have to look at your technical capabilities in your organization too, and it probably goes one way or the other. And they, so that stickiness that the cloud providers can grab onto, they try to do today, right? In the long run, though, in the future, the stickiness, the technical and the integrations will get easier, and the stickiness is going to have to be based off quality of service, right? So those who are more quickly improving the quality of service and improving the integration over the long haul, unless their sheer size can stop it over the long haul, the smaller ones are going to be able to pop up and give that ability to make shifts and the ability to kind of somewhat hide having to have the extreme technical skills, and whether it's Microsoft or Google or Oracle or whatever the platform is, right? So it's going to be interesting to see where that goes, but certainly now that stickiness comes from, the related technologies that they're also selling to you.
Great point, Mike. Well, why don't we talk a little bit more about that? And clearly when you're talking about those architectural, technical sticky points, need to work very closely with your IT organization to understand those. Talk a little bit about, working with your IT organization in your cloud decision making.
Yeah, I can start out on that one, and just, I'm biased slightly here because I spent a lot of my career in IT, in IT development and leadership positions, and so have came forward with a viewpoint on that. And certainly the cloud providers make it really easy with a credit card or another way to pay to kind of get away from your procurement organization and to get away from your IT team. But inevitably, integrations and systems of record and data integrations have to come into play, right? And if you want to build a island of automation that sits out in the cloud that doesn't talk to the rest of your systems in a company, you can take that approach, right? But inevitably, and in my career, going back to the enabling technologies like Microsoft Access, where people would go build a bunch of things on their own and they would say how great it was until it got too big, and then they needed to come to IT. And this has been my experience. They come to IT to help them out in the future, right? And so you're better off bringing IT in from the go, and then procurement, of course, as well, because you're going to make sure that you get better competition, and you're going to make sure that it's better aligned to the overall technologies and capabilities in your company. So look at IT as your friend to help do this, not as the function that's going to slow you down of getting your island of automation implemented.
I think there's also the responsibility of security that you have to consider when you're spinning these up, right? It's public cloud, and you're probably putting somewhat confidential information on there. And so having your security team set up access controls and proper guardrails around that data is super important, having governance over that. I've seen cloud start getting used at a company, and it's just sort of this free for all, and everyone's jumping on, and you have all these instances and they're not tagged, and you're trying to go through the accounting and figure out who's using what instance. And it's really difficult to do. And so then you go through you start maturing and start creating some governance around that so that you know how to even deal with the cost allocation of the bill, which can be a pretty big task in itself. So just thinking through like proper setup early actually is helpful from a security perspective, from a governance perspective. There's just so much upside there.
And I'm going to add to that, right, Kim, like bingo, that is so huge. Couple of companies I worked at, security was huge, right? And it's less about governance, because people think, oh, you need governance. Like, nah, it's not about the bureaucracy, it's about the need. You gotta have the bureaucracy because you have the need, right? And Mike, I've worked in IT too, and I've had those conversations, right? And where IT gets all puffed up, but the reality is you need it. Yes, it is on the public cloud. If you do not set it up, if you don't have the right controls, when people leave, they still have the access. I mean, you gotta turn them off. I mean, that's like the basic stuff, right? What I'm seeing is a lot of times it's not just internal, right? You're also collaborating with customers. So you got customer data. I think data privacy. It is, at least for me, doing technology procurement for so many years, privacy is becoming a bigger and bigger part of my job. Almost every single contract I do, everything I get involved in, I mean, I would say working a lot on data privacy and security and stuff is huge. And so setting up the governance structure, making sure that someone's on top of it is really important. And someone asked in the chat about multi-cloud. To me, that is also one of the barriers of multi-cloud, because you got different ones going. Again, big company, totally different deal, right? You got lots of people, throw them at it. But smaller companies, medium-sized companies, you set up multi-cloud. Now you need different governance structures or different security setup and everything, and someone monitoring it and everything. That overhead can be pretty high. Not sure how much you would save. I mean, again, you got to do the math. You got to sit down and do all the analysis. But is that savings worth it? Something to look at.
Mm-hmm.
Security's come up a lot. Let's kind of throw that one out there. That was probably, for the early adopters, the biggest concern with going out to the public cloud. But Is it fair to say simply that, Amazon or Google security is probably better than yours anyway? Is it that simple, or is there more to it?
Yeah, it's kind of, I'll take the first cut. Others want to jump in. It's kind of funny. Had that conversation with our CIO the other day. And his view, which I totally agree with, we're all going to try and get hacked. Some hacker's going to come after all of us, okay? The chances of Amazon and Google and everything having better security than us, yeah, probably. They have much more higher level and stuff. So yes, their security will be better, but you have to have turned it on. Someone has to have gone in. Just because they made it available doesn't mean you got it set up on your own account. And if you have not set up your account correctly, you have not done all that, then yeah, you're going to get hacked. And that doesn't matter if it's private or public cloud. I mean, it's on the cloud, it's going to happen.
In my view, it depends as well on the risk appetite that your company or government official or entity has. Because in the end, if you have a huge risk appetite, then you definitely will select one or the other. If you're scared about going into a and you want to keep all the data, if you're gonna be scared by having a managed private cloud, even you might want to keep everything in house. So you're gonna do that. And if you have if you want to take the risk, then you're gonna go public cloud and say, hey, I'm not gonna be the first one. Thousands, millions of customers are already there. Why hack me and not the other? And in the end, like Sanjay said, it really depends on turning it on. From security perspective, they offer the tools. You have the tools. You have encryptions. You have different possibilities to protect your data, even in the public cloud. So you need to do it, and in the end, hope for the best, because you're gonna do the same in your house. You can easily get mugged in your house or in somebody else's house, even if it's a private cloud. So it really depends on your organization's risk appetite.
Yeah, and I'll just I'll add on top of what has been said. I think individual companies have to have their own comfort level of what they put in the cloud, and there may be engineering designs or other things that they feel so strong about to keep internal. But the fact would be the cloud providers, have to have the absolute best security because they have the most exposure and the most attacks. Our company gets attacked, all your companies are getting attacked. And yeah, it's important for your company, but the cloud providers are doing it for hundreds and thousands of companies, right? And it's table stakes for them to be able to make sure that they are secure and can do those things. So where you should have great faith in your own company and their ability to secure the environment. When you look at a world where the most precious resource seems to be those who have great security knowledge and capability, you want to make sure that those who can hire the best, and that would be probably your cloud providers, are out there getting the best talent and are going to protect your environment extraordinarily well. And if you just do an anecdotal search in Google, you probably figure out that there's far less information or noise about cloud providers being hacked than there is about other companies having data breaches or other type things like that.
Yeah. One other thing to think about is, we talk about our own data or using these cloud providers for internal usage and stuff, but think about all your SaaS providers. So, I mean, we all use tons of, or have signed deals with SaaS providers, HR data, right? Financial data, you got Anaplan, you got all these companies, right? All of them. And guess what? They're all using cloud providers. And we've taken to, asking them, and as long as they're with one of the big ones, it's like, yeah, that's fine. Who's your host? And most of them are, AWS, GCP, Azure, and that's usually what it comes out to. And so your data is out there in the cloud, if not just in what you're using, but what your providers are using. And again, that security has to be out there.
Great point. So much of the cloud today is enabled. So much of the software being out on the cloud and developers being out on the cloud has enabled people to, outside of the IT organization, to procure and consume IT, right? You have your MarTech and your HR tech and your FinTech and all of that out there. And to the earlier point about security, being able, knowing to turn on the switch and knowing what to do. What's procurement's role in supporting non-IT consumers of these IT products, where we're traditionally working directly with the IT organization? Kim, I see you pondering that thought.
When I think about that, what comes to mind is just ensuring that they're educated on probably best practices around making sure that we still go through the efforts of doing security review of those products to ensure that they meet the standards for the company, and that they've thought through competitive solutions, and that you're arriving. It's funny. So people will come and say, "Oh, I've got this really great thing I'm going to do, and here it is." And I'll be like, "Who else have you talked to that in this space? Is there any other providers that you've also explored?" And sometimes it could be just as much as a salesperson. There's a relationship there. They've gotten their hooks. They've sold everything to them, and it sounds like a really great solution. And they don't really have maybe the skill set of a procurement person, where we're just a little skeptical of the sales pitch, and we go, "Wait a minute, let's just look and see how great this brochure actually lives up to its claims." So just kind of being that objective voice to help them look at things a little bit differently and ensure that we're doing the correct security protocols would probably be the most important.
We're getting a lot of questions on the I'm sorry, Mike, you were gonna.
No, I maybe I'm looking at it the wrong way, but I always look at you're grateful that happy that they came to you in procurement to talk about it, and I always look at if I can use a sports analogy, procurement as the point guard to ensure that you're passing the ball and getting all the right organizations involved, right? So whether it's your security team should be one of your best friends if you're doing technology procurement and supporting the organization, but you got to look at the HR aspects of it, the financial aspects of it, all those things. And so if procurement is doing their job in the center there, you're a good guide, and you're an expert to the business people coming to you on what's the fastest and best way to do this, or go find something that's even better, or maybe we already have something and you're not even aware of it. And we can do a good job of pulling in those others, right, to make sure that visibility is there. The only downside of that is sometimes they see that as slowing themselves down, but getting it right is what they want as well, right? And so you just have to be persistent in being that point guard or the quarterback in that situation. So sorry for the sports analogy.
No, to compliment you, Mike, and I was pondering of what Kim was saying. I got a question at some point. Ioana, why are you making things so difficult? because of course they have already done a POC. They were ready to go. Like let's start, right? When can we start? We don't have a contract. It's okay. We can sign one in 1 week, and then we get a quote in another week, and then we just go for it. We start the implementation. And I was hold on. Let's analyze. Let's start thinking about the solution. Let's start thinking about the competition. Let's bring in some more players. There are a lot of there is a lot of support actually, even though the area is new. There is a lot of support on the web where you find different quadrants with the top players for a different for a certain area. So you definitely go and search for it, and then you bring other players, and you do your security, you do your risk assessment, and then the result might not be the same as the stakeholders would like that. And then why is sourcing making things difficult? But it's our job, right? We are the point guards. That's clear.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yep, we're getting a bunch of questions. Let me just look at a couple of questions that are coming in. This is one around, I think, from a procurement standpoint that resonates. Do you allow payments to be made via credit card to the cloud suppliers, or do you require POs?
So my view is it depends on your company's style. And do you allow credit cards or not. For in the past, other companies I worked with, it was PO only. We did not do credit cards for providers like this. At other companies, we have a lot of credit cards. I also remember one company that wanted to do credit cards because they got that rebate back. So, it's not a simple answer. It totally depends.
It does impact visibility, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would second that. I think it depends on the company. And I've seen a mix of both at the same company for different purposes. When you've got a large cloud contract, though, I mean, obviously you're probably doing reserve instances or a prepaid contract for a discount. There's all sorts of different levers to be pulling that, credit cards become less of a relevant thing. But yeah, for smaller instances, a credit card's just fine.
Exactly.
Yeah, I would look at it as you should really be focused on, getting it on a formal PO and contract. You get into risk and ownership issues if you have employee names on as the true owner, and if that employee were to leave, you can have issues in there and getting access to the data or that type of thing, right? And so it's probably best to lock down your cards. And if you do need to buy something, make sure it's on a procurement owned P card versus an employee owned travel and expense card. They don't need to be putting cloud services on their own card.
Great point. As with everything else that we buy, there's reasons for having things in a controlled process other than just, cost and simplicity, right? And when you have data out in the cloud and being able to know that it's out there and make sure it's being managed correctly becomes much more important perhaps than ease of payment through a credit card. So let's talk, I'm scrolling through the questions here. A lot of good stuff. A lot of just focused around, how do you choose the right provider? What differentiates them? What are the things that, your IT organization, your stakeholders can give you in terms of specs to help you go to market and decide either to sole source it or multi-source it and that sort of thing. Any standard stuff you work with on your IT department to go to market?
Yeah, go ahead, Kim.
I was just going to say, most of the companies I've worked for, there's already been a fairly large presence with a particular provider. And due to the complexities of any kind of migration effort and balancing that, we tend to standardize as much as possible on one primary provider. And that would be who we'd look to first and foremost for solutions for new people who have needs. That said, there's always room to bring in another provider as well to create a competitive environment. And if you have a use case and there's a particular advantage of one provider over the other, then certainly explore that, but with a little bit of leaning in towards the incumbent. Has been my experience. I've never come into a company where we're starting in a fresh environment and evaluating all cloud providers equally in this utopia.
Yeah, that's a good point. You are going to have some favorites, and for good reasons, right? And you want to leverage them as much as you're possible for all the kind of technical and risk things we talked about previously. And I think a lot of traditional, due diligence and understanding what the true requirements are always come into play. I think one thing I would stress is just it's really important, especially if you're a big buyer of technology, that you have a joint roadmap with your technology organization, and not just what are we buying this month and next month, not just what's coming up for renewal, but what's that long-term plan. So you should have some kind of, we put in place a technology investment council that we co-chair with the CIO of the company to ensure that we can build that up, and just having a regular cadence of understanding roadmaps and how they tie together is just as important as a great negotiation on a specific deal, probably more important, right? Because then you're ahead of the game on these big purchases, and you can work very effectively with them. But you got to build up trust, and you got to show that you're adding value to the process. But it will work. You just have to put the effort into making that happen.
I'm a big advocate of making impossible possible, and in my view, I think the procurement process if you follow the process, it will lead you to an interesting result. In a sense that indeed it depends on the type of procurement. It depends on the scale of the procurement. But I personally try to look at everything with fresh eyes. Okay, we have this new procurement. Let's see what we can do with it. And there are different components that you look at in all the competition that you bring. Of course, contract matters, pricing matters, solution matters, security matters, privacy matters. I have named them randomly. They are all as important, definitely. And that is why I believe that you need to look at everything very objectively, and you might get even surprised at the result if you stick to the process.
So let's talk a little bit more about the differentiators in the market today. We can stick to the big three, but if there's other providers out there that you want to throw in the mix, please do. But one of the concerns, what about just support for the end users? Things like support tools, forecasting tools, those sort of things. What do you see out there in the market, and are there meaningful differences across the providers? Why don't we start with Sanjay on that?
All right. I'd say that all three of them are fairly, again, this is why they're all the three big ones. They're all at parity in one sense. It really depends on your team. Again, this is that standard of when you got different companies you work with, right? Who's the team you're working with? One thing I will say with Google is that they are really pushing the channel partners. Get a good partner, and they will provide you a lot of good service, right? I think AWS does a good job. Azure does a good job, depending on your size, depending on your team, depending on what you're looking for. Again, so many different factors, right? That earlier conversation we're having, I've done so many RFPs in my life, and sometimes we've gone, crazy, because working for engineering companies, you've got 100 things you're looking at, and, everything is, you're putting scores on everything, and you're adding it all up, and, what's the real difference between a 89 out of 100 versus a 91 out of 100? And different things, and people get all hung up. And it's like, who do you like and who do you want to go with? I would say all three of them give you good service. All three of them have good good architectures, good security. It really depends on which one your IT team, your R&D team, all the users like, and then that's my view. And the pricing, you can get them within each other. I would say that's a huge thing.
Yeah, I think Sanjay did a great job of answering that without having to get too specific, because it's so hard, right? It depends on your organization, and they're all providing a good service. Otherwise, they wouldn't have kind of gotten to the point they're at. They're not there just because they started out big because they had other things there. They're good at what they do, and they're providing a good service. You got to look at those intangibles that are most important to your organization, whether it's related technical skills, or whether it's the flexibility of the model to go on-prem, hybrid, into the cloud. It's a really hard question to answer. I saw it pop up in the list. I was glad Sanjay tried to ask it or answer it first.
Yeah, the only real limitation that I have seen to date has been around sort of global footprint. Some are certainly have a little bit better presence than others, and some of the smaller providers. I think that's probably their biggest challenge. When you've got a product that you're launching worldwide, and they can't answer all of the regions, and so then you have to look at several solutions.
Yep. And Kim, totally that matters if you're a global company that is looking for a huge footprint. If you're just US only or something, then different. But yeah, you're right. Those come to the little small intangibles. What are you looking for? Well, what kind of architecture do you need? What support do you need?
Right. And then you get into the fun of thinking about transit costs of data and egress and all of that. It gets really complex, but it is important to sort of bake that into your total cost analysis.
Yeah, one number I had shared earlier, I thought about earlier was, we have looked at another company. I looked at moving cloud providers, and that the work on our technology team, I'm calling technology because with R&D, engineering, IT all involved, was going to be huge. And I actually threw out a number and I said, okay, how much savings do I need to bring to you for you to move? Right? Is it 10%, 15%, 20%? Because at some point you're going to want to move. I mean, the price is enough for the pain. And 15 to 20%, people were like, don't want to move. We took it up pretty high level, and people were like, I'd rather pay the 15 to 20% extra and stay, because that hassle of moving is so much. And that obviously limits, from a procurement viewpoint, that limits negotiating power. And it goes back to kind of what Mike said. When you go with these providers and you sign up a contract, this is longer term. I mean, they will say do a 3-year contract, you get all these discounts. But man, once you are in them, that hassle of moving becomes higher. So to just keep that in mind and set up contracts and do your negotiations with that in mind.
Yep, great point. And some of the other things that make it sticky, particularly, AWS is renowned for having this broad ecosystem of tools and support and things that go beyond just the architecture of your application, right? I mean, Google's famous for inventing Kubernetes, which lets you kind of lift and shift the code pretty well. But there are other things in the ecosystem beyond that. Let's talk about a specific tool people are asking about, your usage and forecasting management, right? Have you seen any differences in the tools that are out there? How much do you rely on that? Particularly, as we said, you have a broad base of users out there, not just your traditional IT development organization. You've got a lot of people out there using it. How do you get a full picture of your usage and your forecasting? Anybody have any thoughts on that? Kim?
I think that's just a lot of footwork right there, but it's fundamental to getting those numbers together. It's really important too when you think about optimizing the spend. If you've got usage that's going to be pretty consistent over a period of time, you want to get reserved instances, which are now savings plans now in an AWS environment purchase to leverage those discounts for reserving the usage. And then, so if you've got a cloud presence and there's all of these different teams consuming it kind of requires a little bit of legwork to work with each one of them to understand what their usage is going to look like, and make sure they have visibility as to what it's been historically, talk through any major events that might change that going forward, and then leaning on getting your finance teams and stuff to help forecast that. It's a big part.
I did a project where we looked at a provider to move the cloud providers, and I actually have that email over, and I'm like, wait. So the new one, they're like, we're gonna make it easy on you, and we all know what that means, right? I mean, they're gonna make it easy. They're gonna ask for a bunch of information, and the 3 big things that they asked for were architecture diagrams, server inventories, and your current builds with your current cloud provider, as far back as you can. Sounds simple. Architecture diagrams, not that simple to get, especially when it's multiple different groups and everything using it. Server inventory is kind of simpler. And then the other thing is, I think Kim just mentioned it, is, how do you see that usage going up? What more do you see using and everything? And it was not easy on our part to get all that information. I mean, I had to go talk to multiple different groups, try and get all that information together. Good enough is good enough. And then do a side-by-side comparison and the pricing and everything. So it is doable. It is not a project to be taken lightly from a procurement viewpoint.
Yeah, we're getting questions, some real great specific questions around different services, development libraries, AI, and machine language functionality. I'm going to just speak for the group and say, as procurement folks, we're probably not best equipped to go into detail on that. However, I would recommend that after this call, jump into the Procurement Foundry discussion channels. There's a lot of folks there that can really dive into more specific topics like that and get that conversation going in that forum. So I recommend we take some of those questions there if we don't get to them here. Question about utilization of Amazon Marketplace. Any thoughts on that and the ratio of marketplace to private offers?
When it comes to marketplace, I think as a procurement specialist, you need to be quite controlling of the marketplace in all cloud providers, because in the end, marketplace can be a click away purchase by any account owner, which means that you haven't actually consulted the T's and C's. You as procurement, you weren't even involved as procurement. The decision rests solely on the account owner or the user, which means that marketplace generally would need to be something that procurement is aware of, that procurement works together with IT in order to make sure it is controlled and not open for purchase, because then you would, from pricing perspective and from T's and C's perspective, you would be completely uncovered there.
Yeah, I think marketplaces are incredibly powerful add-ons that you can do, but to Ioana's point, nothing should be going through any of those marketplaces, and there's more and more coming up all the time that you're not understanding as a procurement organization. And it needs to be fully integrated into what you're doing. So if people are using a marketplace standalone and then trying to expense things through, you've defeated the purpose, right? It should be tied into your, source to settle environment, which many of them already do. It's kind of, what you have to do, but you need to control and understand what's coming through those purchases. And that may be down to a $5 purchase, but certainly there shouldn't be significant purchases going through those marketplaces without a good understanding by your organization of what those are and that you've enabled that to happen. And it needs to be monitored on a regular basis.
So this actually brings up a question for me that I'm going to ask because I can. I have grilled AWS teams in the past. Like, what is the benefit of Marketplace? Why do I use Marketplace? And the best answer I could get is that spend on Marketplace can go towards any EDP commit. And that's the benefit. Is there any other benefit that I'm not aware of? Please help.
So Kim, I'm laughing because I have done the same thing over the last 3 months and I get that same answer. You can use it against your commit. And I'm like, all right, but what other benefit? And as far as the downside,
right?
I don't have the T's and C's, right? I mean, someone can go click on it. It's your T's and C's. I don't like it. I don't have any control. I'm like, yeah, but you can say, it's like, tell me. And we haven't pulled the trigger because I'd love to know. I even asked it in the Procurement Foundry Slack channel. I'm like, can someone please explain this to me? Because I don't get it.
The fun thing is not even Amazon or Azure or Google. It's not their T's and C's. It's actually the supplier themselves T's and C's.
Whatever they put
I don't know
in.
which I don't know if it's even worse actually, because if you have a contract with Amazon or with Google or whomever, Azure, then at least you have a contract. But then with the others, you don't have absolutely anything regulated. So yeah, it is indeed an interesting aspect. I think it's also the benefit would be the fact that you'll get access immediately to the technology that you're looking for, but then you need to look at the exposure that you're setting the company towards.
Yeah, I think it's really geared towards small businesses. So much of Amazon is being built on these tiny startups that don't have procurement functions. They don't have that kind of capability. So it's just an ease of use and a way for them to scale up their discounts and just make it easy for people who aren't,
Yeah, great point, Matt.
Where we're at.
That's a good point.
But in our last few minutes, why don't we let's hit the big ones. In your contracts, what do you want to look out for, right? What pricing elements, what terms and conditions, what are the big hitters that the audience should know about when going to contract with AWS or Azure or any of the others? What discounts, tips, tricks, whatever you got. Start with Kim. Jump at it.
The amount of leverage you're going to have on these contracts varies, depending on how much commit you're talking about and how invested the relationship is. So it's not a one size fits all. If you're looking at very large contracts with a particular provider, there's some things that you can explore through enterprise discount programs or pricing, the PPA pricing, private pricing addendum or something. They've got all the different acronyms, but the biggest thing is just, making sure that you don't overcommit. You never want waste at the end of it. And so be conservative. You'll get a lot of pressure to grow your commit. Stand firm. You do not have to grow. That is not a requirement of a new contract. They should be thankful to get your business year after year and show gratitude for that. And I'm very quick to remind them of that. And then, you can get your transit costs, special pricing set up for that. You can explore, I don't think there's any rules. You should be everything's on the table. You should negotiate everything. That's my answer.
Mike?
Yeah, the number one best thing you can do when you get into these is make sure that the business partner you're supporting is nowhere near the conversation. And talking back with whoever it is, right? And giving the love signal on whatever it is you're buying here. I think we touched on my other point, second point a little bit more is just what can you leverage across, other spend that you might have with that partner, other technologies that can link together, right? Because I think as Kim, you noted really well, nothing should be off the table. But if you can bundle a little bit something extra in there, everybody likes getting more onto the table.
You're talking primarily, I guess, about Microsoft, right? Microsoft is so difficult to negotiate with, but if you're giving them Azure business, they will suddenly get flexible on their other product pricing.
Yeah, I think, I'll generalize and say it's probably more than just one that is willing to do that. And it helps you and it helps them, right? But yeah, Microsoft is probably more known for that in kind of the industry. Good point, man.
And I'll just throw in a couple, because we're running out of time, a couple ones, look at every element of price in there. I can't tell you how many times people have gotten burned on egress charges and transit charges. Know those, understand what your volumes are going to be, because they'll come back to bite you when you try and down the road when you try and get your data out of there and try and actually use the platform. Any other pricing elements or tools or anything anybody should be aware of before we wrap up today?
Yeah, just go to them and tell them to give you the same deal they give Kim.
There you go. Perfect.
Well, thank you, everybody. Great discussion. Again, I know we didn't get to everything. There's so much to dive in on. Go to the Procurement Foundry Slack channels. There's always a big after party and a conversation with hundreds of your peers instead of just the few of us that are here today. So thank you, everyone. Keep your eye out for next month's panel, and we'll see you 1 month from today. And thank you, panelists, so much. Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.